Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Young Adult Mentor video chat. Just a couple notes before we get started. If you are just stumbling on this video and you don't know what pitchwars is a mentoring organization where every year established writers and industry professionals mentor one up-and-coming author, and you can learn much more about that at pitchwars.org. So make sure you check out those pages. Also, if you missed some of the previous video chats and you want to go back and watch those, you can do that by going to this link, bit.ly/pitchwarslive. And all the future chats are also going to be available at that link. So this one is also going to be, it's a playlist on YouTube, so it's going to be available there. I'm so sorry, my throat is, all right. So today we are being joined by 3 mentors for the first hour and then 4 mentors for the second hour. Sorry, my computer started playing noise randomly. All right. And wish lists have been released, so the mentors can talk about their wish list, but we can't take anything that's like a pre-query. So if you're just like pitching your entire book and asking, are you interested in that? We're not taking those questions. And if there's anything that's like a procedural question, just like a rules question, I'll just answer it real quick so we can get, through those. And then finally, if you want to ask questions, make sure you're going to the page on YouTube and asking in the YouTube live chats. So if you're watching this on Twitter and you want to ask a question, you're going to want to click through to YouTube so you can ask the question there. And also today, our Twitter captain is Stephen Morgan. He's going to be bringing us questions from Twitter if any are asked there, but we don't recommend it because it takes a while for us to get those here. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself first. I am Sarah Nicolas. I am the Pitchwars Managing Director for 2019. I'm a young adult author of Keeping Her Secret, among other things. And I was a Pitchwars mentor from 2012 to 2017. And last year I was the social media director. And this year I am the managing director. So we have a couple people watching. So while the mentors are introducing themselves, if you all want to start asking your questions so we can get those rolling, we will do that. So first up is Kyle.
Hi, I'm Kyle T. Cowan. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm mentoring with Brenda Drake this year. If you don't know who she is, she's the founder of Pitchwars. And I'm a YA author. I have one hybrid published book out called Sunshine is Forever. And I'm repped by Jennifer March Soloway at Andrea Brown Agency. And yeah, I'm also an actor too. So if you want to look me up, you can go to IMDb and IMDb me. So thanks.
Hi, I'm Annette Christie. I am co-mentoring this year with Sonia Hartle. This is my 3rd year mentoring, but Sonia has been doing this forever. I am a YA author. My debut, Dear Nemesis, is coming out in fall 2020. I also write women's fiction and rom-coms. I'm repped by Jess Dallow of Brower Literary.
Hey, I had to unmute myself. I'm Adalyn Grace. I am a young adult fantasy author of All the Stars and Teeth. It comes out in February. And yeah, ignore the mess behind me. I'm moving.
I told y'all that would happen. So, all right. Sometimes when I switch it over, it sticks for a second. So we have our first question, but yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. When making final decisions on your manuscript, will you talk to potential mentees to make sure your vision matches for the piece?
Adalyn, do you want to go first? Okay, I will. So this happens occasionally, but not every time. I would say if we are proposing major overhaul changes, then we'd want to talk to the mentee first and make sure they'd be open to that and open to this new vision. Otherwise, no. If it's just kind of a general edit letter, then I don't think we'd be checking in beforehand.
I always talk to them. I would say that if you get an email from me, don't get like too excited because I like to talk to everybody that I'm even remotely considering. Just I really like to get their opinion on like what they're willing to change, what they're not willing to change, kind of just their vision for their book before I really dive too deep into it. So yeah, I love to talk to everybody just to make sure that our visions line up and that they kind of have a similar editorial like vision that I do.
Yeah, I think since we're going to be working together probably for 2 or 3 drafts, I want to make sure, and I'm pretty sure Brenda feels the same, that we just want to make sure that we line up with what we're going to suggest, because we don't want to do something to your manuscript that you don't want to do. And if you don't agree with us, like, that's totally fine. It's your writing. It's not our place to tell you what to do. We can only advise. So if the advice is like not advice that you're going to want, then probably we're not going to be a good match for each other. So that's why we talk.
All right, and I will say it depended a lot on the manuscript. I didn't always take on manuscripts that required like big changes, so in that case, I might not ask ahead of time. But if I was taking on one that I wanted to do big changes on, then I would ask ahead of time. Okay, Lee asks, my first question, can we assume that all mentors want diverse voices, or does it have to be mentioned specifically in the wish list? And I will say, I've said this like so many times, and I feel like I'm just going to keep saying it until September 27th. The wish lists are not, they can't be like entirely, what I can't even think of the word I'm trying to think of right now, but they can't list every single thing that they could possibly want on there. And so just make sure you're kind of keeping an open mind there and being like, oh, well, they asked for this and this and this, and so my manuscript doesn't have those things, so I shouldn't submit to them, because that's not necessarily the case. So, but I'm going to let the mentors answer this question too.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, so the answer is that, like, use our wish list as a guideline, and like assume that if we don't specifically say we don't want something, that we're open to it.
Yeah, I want to echo what Kyle just said. I'd also like to say, Pitchwars in and of itself is an inclusive organization. So obviously, I would say every mentor volunteering this year is open to that. And yeah, if it's not necessarily on our wish list, we're still open to it unless it's one of our, we are not the best mentor for that list. So absolutely.
Yeah, just everybody else kind of already said it, but just echoing everybody. I don't think there's a mentor who doesn't want that or who would not be open to it, especially now that the selection for Pitchwars mentors is a lot more reviewed. I don't think that there's anybody who's not going to want that.
Okay, this person asked, my book is the first in a planned series, and I know the ending sounds weak from the synopsis. I say it has series potential in the query, but how would you react to that sort of submission?
I'll jump in if that's okay. Yeah, weak endings are a problem I think we've all experienced. They're really, really hard to nail and get right. And I think that's one of the great things about working with Pitchwars mentors is we can help you tighten and strengthen that ending. That said, it's pretty common in a query letter to say this has series potential. So yeah, definitely we'd be open to that.
And to go off of that, we'll kind of like see if we can make it a standalone book, because a lot of the times, like when you're querying and stuff, agents want to make sure that it can stand by itself too. But endings are hard. Talk to Stephen King, so we can help you with it.
Yeah, I feel like You say that it sounds weak from the synopsis. I'm not sure if you actually feel that it is weak or if just the synopsis is showing that. If it's just the synopsis, like, making it sound that way, that's one thing. We'll know, like, especially I feel like if I get to the end of the synopsis and I'm like, oh, that line's weak, I'm not going to, like, not read the book because of that, you know? So, and I think that, like Kyle was saying, I don't feel like I need to so much make it completely standalone, but mostly tying up all the threads in an ending and making sure that if say a publisher bought the book, like, it could potentially stand alone, but I don't have to make it like rigid, just more like tying up most of the threads and maybe leaving a couple out for a potential sequel.
And my only
Agreed.
caution, my only caution is, and I'm not saying that you did this, but don't say it's standalone if it's not. Because I know that people are saying, you know, series are hard sell right now, and it's best to say standalone with series potential. But if it's not standalone, don't set that expectation up front because people are going to be disappointed with that. Brenda stopped by, just hopping in to say you are all amazing. All right, we have another question. Are you looking to make lifelong connections with your mentee? Lifelong, okay.
I could start. I think it really depends on the mentee. I know some people like more of a business relationship, and that's totally fine. Like, if it naturally flows, then it naturally flows. But I would push it like, hey, you want to be my best friend forever? Like, I'm not gonna do that. That's a little much. So we just kind of gotta like if it works out that way, sure, absolutely great. I would love to make a lifelong friend, but if not, then that's fine too. And having a more business relationship is perfectly acceptable. That's great too.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going into it like, I don't want to be your friend, but it is a business relationship. So the way I look at it is I'm here to advise, to help you, and kind of emulate what you're going to get from an editor or an agent with your developmental letter and things like that. So it is a business relationship first and foremost, because we all have other things going on too. But I mean, if a friendship develops and we become lifelong friends, like, I'm not opposed to that.
Sonia and I are kind of on the other end of this. Our past mentees we talk to every single day. They're some of my most prized critique partners. But yeah, it's something that when we fall in love with a manuscript and we find a writer whose voice we want to elevate, we tend to kind of fall in love with them too, and a friendship naturally develops. And so we are happy to add another mentee to our coven, someone who we can continue to have a relationship with, who can critique for us, who we can critique for them. So yeah, it's something that we would love to have. It doesn't have to happen, but it has naturally happened in the past.
Yeah, so mine, I'm still friends with Lee Marr, who's our social media director now, and she was one of my mentees, and some of my mentees I kind of don't talk to, and I think it just depends on the personalities of the two people involved. So Lee asks, if an author whose MS you're considering participates in DV Pit the last week of October, will that affect your choice when choosing your mentee? I asked this yesterday on Twitter to a few other mentors. No one wants to answer this.
I have no idea, honestly. Like, I think if your manuscript finds success before you get selected for pitchwars, like, good for you. I mean, you should be doing whatever you can to find success for your work. So I'm not like even looking at that, to be honest. I'm looking at people who submit to us. But I mean, if you get agented before the selection process happens, like, good for you. I mean, like, that's a win. So like, I'm not opposed to considering you, even if, so yeah.
I would say it's, this business is all about the hustle. And like Kyle said, you have to do what you got to do. So if you are out there hustling, we support you. Just make sure that you check in with the mentors you've submitted to and say, hey, by the way, I have an agent who's interested in this. That actually happened to me my year. I was speaking to an agent after I got selected. She contacted me. And so I talked that through with Sonia, and ultimately the agent relationship didn't work out and I was able to participate in pitch wars. But yeah, do what you got to do. It's your baby, your manuscript, your career.
Yeah, I agree with everybody else. I just think if who I select is willing to contact the agents who have any of their materials and just be like, hey, I was selected for pitch wars. I know you're still considering, like, if you're willing to wait until I have a more polished copy after pitch wars with the manuscript, that'd be great. But if you would rather go like to the, like if an agent's about to offer and you'd rather go that way, then that's absolutely fine. I would just like to know, but yeah, do what you got to do.
So as the managing director, I do have to say and emphasize again that Pitch Wars is primarily about the mentorship. A lot of people think about the agent showcase because that is public and so it gets a lot of attention. But the bulk of the work that goes into it and the real value in it is the mentorship. And so if someone were pitching on ZB Pit and they think they're ready to go to agents, I would question whether or not they actually valued the mentorship or if they just were in it for the agent showcase. But I'm a skeptic, so. Okay. Molly asks, if you see a manuscript that has a huge word count, would that turn you off from selecting that book? Or do you focus mostly on the plot and writing style? And I mentioned this in another video, and I just wanted to say, we get a lot of these questions, not this one's particularly, but we get some questions that seem like people are just wanting the mentors to say, yeah, it's fine if your book is 200K. And our mentors just can't do that. So, but this is, feel free to answer this, y'all. And yeah.
I have a hard cutoff of 120,000 words. That's actually even higher than what it was last year for me of 110,000 words. Just because, I mean, I don't think a young adult fantasy manuscript debut needs to be 140,000 words or 200,000 words. I think that there's definitely room to cut, maybe make into 2 books. And it's also just like a time thing. Like if we're receiving the amount of submissions that Pitch Wars like normally receives, it's just so much to go through and to read those really big manuscripts. And it's kind of the same thing for agents. Like that's why there's sort of the like 100,000 word fantasy, not hard cut off, but like that's what people like to say on Twitter and online and stuff. Just because it gets to be so much. Sorry, my cat's like trying to kill my laptop right now.
Yeah, I'd say the genres that Sonia and I are accepting this year, we're looking for between 60 and 80, but there's definitely wiggle room. If you are turning in 150 or 200K, you got time. So I would say go in there and kill some darlings before you submit.
I agree with that. So, I mean, word counts contemporary, I'm looking probably 60 to 90K. And then, sci-fi fantasy series potential up to 120K. And the reason why is because, like, think about when you were a kid too. Like, would you have picked up this thick book from an author you don't know? The reason we'll read like a huge Harry Potter book is because Harry Potter had its success before they got that long. I mean, it's a huge commitment as a mentor to do something that's 150K, 200K, 250K. And I do think that if you're submitting something like that, it probably means that you're not finding the right CPs to look at your work before you're getting to us. And we're looking for something that is polished, but needs a little bit of a push to get to that next level. So.
Yeah, I was at my library yesterday. I work at a library, and I picked up the newest Cassie Clare book, and it was legit like this thick. And I was like, this is why people think that books this long are okay. But she can only write books that long because her first books, which were not that long, were a huge success. So, yeah. Karen asks, Do you care how widely queried a book is before pitch wars?
I'll jump in first. Yes. If it's like 10 agents and you've gotten the rejections and you're like testing the pool, testing the waters, totally fine. But I mean, I'm not looking for something that has been sent out to a ton of people, because it makes it harder for you to find success later with that work. As explained on most agency submissions, you know, they don't want you to submit the same work unless it's gone through huge rounds of revision, and pitch wars could be considered that. So if we read it and we fall in love with it and it has been submitted a lot, we'll talk to you. Maybe we can work out a title change, talk about the changes that you've made since you were querying and that we're going to make, and maybe it'll be different enough that you'll be able to resubmit to everyone. But it will be something that is considered if, you know, you've submitted to 120 agents or something like that. Like, it's just tough. So it's tough to answer that. It's a situational question. So
yeah, I'd say it's not a deal breaker for us. When Sonia and I request a full, we will ask a series of questions, and one of those is, has this been widely queried? If we fall in love with it and we think we can do enough work on it to make agents open to it again, sure, we're open to taking it on. It's not a deal breaker.
Yeah, I feel like it really depends on how many queries are sent. Like I was saying earlier, if it's like 120 or even if it's like 50, I'm a little bit of a cynic and I don't believe in querying widely. I don't think it's great for the author most of the times. So I might be a little bit more skeptical, but that said, if I really like the book or if I really have like a great vision for it that the author shares, it might not affect it to a certain extent, unless it's like 120 and it's been all rejections, then that might just be saying it's time to move on to the next story. I don't know if that would be right for me.
Okay, I accidentally skipped a question, but that's fine because I caught it. Mary asks, what advice would you give if the beginning is a little weak?
Beginnings are my nemesis. Those first chapters are everything, because that's what the mentors are going to be looking at. That's what the agents are going to be looking at. So I would say if you want to enter pitch wars and your first chapter right now you're feeling like is weak, use the hashtag, use the community to try to find some other querying writers to help you work on it and tighten it up. Sometimes it means you're starting the book in the wrong place. So I would say play around with that a little bit and try to get it as voicey and powerful as you can. Really, this is a case-by-case basis to give advice on, though, but best of luck.
I really like structural beat sheets, especially the Save the Cat one. I think that if you're really struggling, then maybe that is worth looking into. It breaks down in like a 4-act structure, different beats of a story, and you can kind of go through and fill it out how your story is what I normally recommend, like how it currently is, and then how you want it to be after you review the beat sheet and kind of see the weaker areas or what was hard to fill out. So that could potentially be helpful. That's what I always give to all of my mentees, a lot of my clients as well. I just think it's so helpful.
Yeah, so first lines are kind of the most important thing to your manuscript. So I would say that, you know, if you feel like your manuscript is weak at the beginning or starting at the wrong point or any of these things, run your first line by people and ask, would you read more? And just give them a line. And the reason why I say that is because that is literally what is going to hook an agent, an editor, anyone into continuing down the page, finishing that first chapter, and then deciding if they're going to move forward. And we're basically going through the same process. So you're trying to hook us in the same way you're going to hook your reader, you're going to hook them. So I would really just work on the first line. And if you get that first line perfect, everything kind of falls in place below, slowly but surely. And just take it step by step, moment by moment. Don't jump ahead. Don't try and be like, I need to rush through this to get to the next chapter. Just take everything beat by beat by beat until you get to the end of your book.
I think it also depends on, so Mary just said if the beginning is a little weak, and so we're not quite sure what is weak there. So if it's like, you know, the language itself, then that's, I feel like you should go ahead and try to fix that, right? But if it's, maybe it doesn't grab the attention right away, one, you may not be starting in the right place. And the other is you can weave tension and conflict into any scene. And so that may be something that you want to look at, even if it's not necessarily related to the main conflict of the book. You can still weave some conflict into any scene. Okay, MJ asks, do mentors specifically go in looking for a type of manuscript / writer to build the pitch process? Do you look for specific voices, genres, POVs? So I do want to mention, because I don't know, this sounds like maybe you might not be aware of the mentor wish list. So make sure you check those out. And if you look, it's our, I think it's our pinned tweet right now on Pitchwars, but I might be wrong about that. But yeah, so they are looking for specific genres and things that they have listed in great detail on their mentor wish list. But do any of you had anything to add on top of, you know, what you have in your wish list?
Yeah, I just want to say, Sonia and I love being surprised in our submission pile. We do have a list of things we want to see, but again, as long as it isn't listed under our list of things we don't want to see, we are open to it. And yeah, good surprise. That's always fun when it comes to pitch wars.
All right. Have you ever taken on manuscripts that require a lot of developmental changes? Given the time constraints, are rewrites often the right way to go from your experience? I think, Adalyn, you might have something to say.
So both of my years, I have had, both of my years mentoring, I've asked my mentees to do a full rewrite. I don't go in looking for that. It's just kind of been what has happened. Trust me, I'm not like scouring I'm not looking for that. But I shared the same vision with the authors, and we both ultimately felt that that was the right decision to move forward with that manuscript, making those big changes. So if big changes are needed for the book I absolutely fall in love with, yes, I will ask for them. Again, it is your book. It is not my book. We have to share the same vision. We don't have to share the same vision, but if we're going to do those big kind of changes, we do have to share the willingness to do that and believe that that is the right path. This is also why I talk to all the potential mentees that I'm considering before I pick a manuscript, because if they don't want to do that, that is perfectly fine. It is their book. But if that's something I really feel passionate about and I see that vision and I don't see another vision, then I'm probably not going to select that mentee, just because I don't know then what to do with it. If that makes sense. I don't see their same vision. But yeah, if the author feels the same way I do, we share that vision, I will definitely ask for a full rewrite. The time constraints, yes, it's hard. Mentees have done it though. There's so many that have done it. And I think it just kind of depends on really breaking down like your edit letter, really kind of creating a path forward. And you have to be honest with yourself too, if you have that kind of time commitment. And most mentors, if they see them wanting to do big developmental changes, they'll talk to you before selecting you. Most of them.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to which manuscript we fall in love with. And if there is one that we see this nugget that we just can't let go of and we think it's going to require that, we will, as Adalyn said, talk to you beforehand and make sure you are willing to do it. I would also like to say that I would probably almost every mentee who's ever participated in Pitch Wars has surprised themselves with what they've accomplished during the revision process. And the last couple of years, that window of revising has been larger and has allowed for a lot more freedom in that regard. And yeah, so I'd say if you're willing to do the work and we love your thing, we may ask that of you. And yeah, you're going to surprise yourself with what you can accomplish.
So yeah, pretty much same thing. I would say I haven't selected a manuscript before, so Brenda has. I'm new. I'm looking for something that connects with me. And you also have to keep in mind that a lot of agents now will pick you up and they'll say, rewrite half of your book. And that's just something that you have to consider. They're looking at the market. We're trying to look at the market. We're trying to help you basically make your manuscript appeal. And a lot of the times, like, you'll have a great beginning and this great ending, and then this like middle section is like muddled down with different things that like don't need to be there. And sometimes big developmental notes happen because of that. So, I mean, it's not a turnoff for me. Like, if I like the idea, like, I'm happy to consider anything. So.
I was never the mentor to be like, we're going to make these huge changes, right? Because I mean, I'm a publicist, I'm not an editor. And so I was always kind of going into that with that idea of like, how can we make this book more marketable? You know, I would pick a book that I felt like was almost already there, and it was more like tweaks and, you know, smaller changes. And then Lee submitted, and I asked her to cut, I think it was 60 pages, and put an entirely different like B plot in her story. And luckily, because I sent it to her, I was like, this is what I want to do. If you don't want to do this, let me know, because I don't know what to do otherwise, basically. And not only did she respond back and say, yeah, I want to do that, but she expanded on it. She's like, oh, that's a great idea, and then we could do this and this and this. And that's how I knew that like she really meant that she wanted to do it, as opposed to just saying that she wanted to do it so that, you know, I would pick her. But I do want to say, a lot of people talk about, so the big changes that people make, the big like rewrites and stuff like that, they get talked about a lot. So in the, you know, in Twitter, in the online, the mentee groups and stuff like that, people talk about those huge changes, those huge like rewrites that they do. And I think that's created a perception that like everyone does that every time. And that's not true, because I had a mentee who was kind of surprised that they didn't do like this huge, massive, you know, edit on her book. And I was like, that's not, it doesn't necessarily have to be that. So if that's happening, it's not because like your mentor is lazy or whatever. It's just because that's not what that book needs at that time. All right. A Dose of Kath says, what do you look for in a manuscript / query? What would immediately attract your attention? So how about we split this into 2 questions? We'll do this one at a time. So we'll start with query. What do you look for in a query and what attracts your attention? And then we'll answer the manuscript question afterwards.
So what I'm looking for in a query is someone who has really nailed the themes of their book. And what I mean by that is a lot of queries go very like broad. So like, this book is about kids who are finding themselves with each other and going on an adventure. And it's like, okay, like, great. That could describe so many books. I want to know specifically what is specific about your characters, your themes, and how they pertain to each other in your book, in your plot, that's going to leave me with a question, not give away the ending, and make me want to read more. So it's hard. And the way to figure that out is by going to backs of books that are similar to yours and trying to figure out the formula, you know, figure out what they're doing. And queries, honestly, like usually hook you a little bit with that first line too. So I'm talking a lot about first lines. They're very important in all of this. And really, I think just focusing on what the heart of your story is. Figure that out, and I promise you, you'll be able to write a bomb query that we won't be able to turn down.
Sonia's specialty is actually query letters. She's great at putting them all together. So, we talk a lot when it comes to queries about the hook, the book, and the cook. And so the hook is your elevator pitch. That's what makes your story unique. That's what's going to grab our attention. The book tells a little bit about what's going on. If your query isn't perfect, that's not going to disqualify you from our pile. And then the cook tells a little bit about yourself, but don't stress too much about that. But yeah, if your query isn't as strong as your writing is, don't stress. We are here to help with that. We just want a general idea what makes your book unique and what's it about.
So I think what I look for is somebody who has done their research. There are a lot of people who I think eliminate themselves right off the bat because they'll send a 1,000-word query letter with 800 words of a bio just talking about themselves for the weirdest things I've seen in queries. So really somebody who's done the research. Queries are so formulaic. They just require specific beats. Every single one of them has the same beats. You can find guides, you can find blog posts, tweets. I wrote a tweet about it the other day. So somebody who has just done their research, who knows what a query letter looks like. Does it have to be the most well-written one? No, if it has all the stuff that shows me that they have put the research and the time into figuring out what a query letter is or should be, I feel like that's enough. We can fix the query letter, but so long as it's telling me the story, so long as it's I know that this person's done their research and is trying, and that's enough to continue reading for me.
Can you remind me of the second part of the question?
Yeah, well, I was just about to repose it. Sorry, I was messaging Stephen because he spelled my name wrong when he's quoting me. I was like, why aren't I getting these notifications? It's fine. Everyone spells the name wrong. All right. The second part of the question was, what do you look for in your manuscript? What immediately attracts your attention? And this is, of course, in addition to what you have, on your very detailed wish list.
So I actually think that the first chapter, first page, quite frankly, is more important to me than the synopsis or the query. I'm going to look at both those things to make sure that the story is going somewhere. But I'm probably on submissions going to start with the first page. And the reason why is because I want to make sure the author has a voice, has a vision, has a good first line, is going to hook me in, going to keep me going. And I think seeing that you can write is more important than seeing if you can write a pitch. We can help you write the pitch. I'm pretty good at it. So yeah.
This is an infuriating answer, I know, but it's all about the voice. And I know it's hard because it's hard to be objective about your own writing and know whether or not you have a great voice or a unique voice, but really that's what we connect with. 2 years ago, we chose a writer because her voice gave us chills and made us cry. Last year, we chose a writer because her voice was refreshing and made us laugh and was just so endearing. So yeah, I mean, it's a personal preference and it all comes down to that for us.
Yeah, I feel like voice and I feel like worlds and characters too. I really like atmospheric worlds. If there's a really well-built world or really interesting, unique magic system, because I'm mentoring fantasy, that would really intrigue me. But yeah, it's really so dependent on the story, I feel like if it's gripping characters or if it's a gripping world, it doesn't need to be everything, It could be this one element that just really stands out and pops and draws your attention in.
All right. So in about 20 minutes, we're going to switch over our mentors. So I just wanted to let y'all know that in about 20 minutes, we're going to be hearing from Jenna Lincoln, Abigail Johnson, Sasha Peyton Smith, and Andrea Contos. And so make sure you tune in for that. Also, if you ask the question in the first hour and you want to get the second round of mentors to answer that question, go ahead and ask that again at 1 p.m. so that we can get to that with the second round of mentors as well. I forgot where I was. Here I am. What goes into rather or not you asked for a full manuscript. I feel like we talked about that quite a bit, but if there's anything you want to add on what will get you to request a full.
I read the synopses first. Synopses? I read that first just to see how the story's laid out. And it doesn't have to be a perfect one, but again, if the story as I'm reading the synopsis makes kind of no sense, or I feel like it's weaving all over the place, I might not request the words. To me, I read query, I read synopsis, I read the pages. So yeah, I think that's important. I think the synopsis is still really important.
If you can make me feel something in that first chapter, whether I'm laughing, whether I'm chilled or nervous or upset or totally enamored, that's what will make us request.
All right. Yeah. Nothing to add, Kyle? You good? Okay. Maxwell asks, would you consider selecting an untitled manuscript, or would an untitled story turn you away? I laughed because I just listened to the 2-year-old episode of Print Red podcast about titles and how pretty much no one gets to keep their titles, so titles don't matter anyway. But so yeah, if you guys want to go ahead and answer that question.
I will say on titles, they're very hard. Honestly, it's going to change so much. Pick something that you feel encompasses the story, but honestly, really don't worry about it as much. We hype titles so much, but there's a lot that goes into title choice by the time it gets to that publisher's marketplace announcement. So, worry about it to the extent that it should reflect your book in some way, but don't worry about it to the extent that you're pulling out your hair and you're like, oh my God, my title doesn't match my book perfectly and I don't know what I'm going to do. We'll help you with that.
Yeah, go ahead and put a placeholder. Don't submit untitled. At least put a placeholder in there. But yeah, like Kyle said, there's a good chance we will help you come up with a new title, and then you'll get an agent and your agent will help you come up with a new title. And then you'll sell your book and your publisher will come up with a new title. So don't get precious about it, but put something in there.
I agree. I don't really, if I saw Untitled, yeah, it would probably, I don't know if it would stop me from reading, but it would, yeah, it'd be weird. So put a placeholder, put pork chop or something. It doesn't have to be a great title, but something in there, because like everyone else said, it will probably change. I've worked with both my mentees in the past, and we've changed both of their titles.
Yeah, I'm really, really bad at titles. I've never titled any of my books that have been published under either pen name. Dragons Are People Too was supposed to be a placeholder title, and then the editor ended up liking it. So, all right. John asks, can you talk a little about the difference between young adult and new adult? I have a 3 point of view novel. Most of the chapters feature a 16-year-old. The other 2 POVs are mature adults.
So I could start. So new adult is really difficult because it doesn't really exist in the terms of traditional publishing. There's no space for it on bookshelves. If you go in bookstores, you go in Barnes & Noble, there's no space for it. So for that reason, it's not really selling physical copies. That one is really tough because 2 mature adult characters and then 1 young adult. I would wonder, it would depend so much on themes, but I would wonder if that's not just an adult book. Somebody else can jump in, but I would kind of consider your themes and think of that. That sounds more adult to me, but then I don't know the full book.
Yeah, I agree. If there are 2 adult POVs and 1 teen, I would say there's a good chance that what you're writing is adult. But yeah, check out the themes. That would be really tricky to sell. And I think because of that, mentors would be a little reticent to take a look unless they looked at it and saw a vision for how it could be adult or how it could be YA.
To be honest, if you think your book is YA and it has 2 mature adult perspectives, I would question why the book isn't just told from the perspective of the 16-year-old. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not sure. I wouldn't understand why these older perspectives are, and I would also think that you're missing the point of young adult literature. So look introspectively, but new adult, like, honestly, like, we're probably either going to age characters down or suggest aging them up to adult and submitting to an adult mentor, just because they're like Adalyn said, there's no place in a bookstore for new adult. So
yeah, I just wanted to add, we had in our first couple of adult and young adult mentor video chats, we had quite a bit of a discussion on new adult. So if you're interested in new adult and you're interested in learning more about it, I would recommend you go back and check out those chats, because there were, quite extensive conversations about it. But I agree with what Kyle said. The only time I've ever seen really an adult POV in a YA work well is in mysteries where, like, the villain is the adult, or Sadie. You do have some POV chapters in the podcaster's point of view, but it's still about the teens, not about himself. So Lee is asking a very specific question that is a version of a generic question that I've been asking almost all the mentors. So I'm gonna show Lee's questions, but I'm gonna just go ahead and ask the generic question that Lee's question was, is there a craft book you plan on asking your mentee to read? So we've just been asking the mentors to share, like, their favorite writing resources, whether it's a book or a podcast or a website or anything like that, or all of the above. Basically just list all your favorite writing and publishing resources.
I'd say there isn't a specific. Oh, sorry, Kyle, I totally jumped in there. I'd say there isn't a specific one we tell our mentee to read. It really depends on what they need and what they need to work on. But I would say my big recommendation is not necessarily a craft book, but it's one that's helped me a lot. It's Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and it's more about finding inspiration, living a creative life. And while I read it, I wrote the book of my heart. I felt so inspired, and it's like how to seduce the muses, And so it's less about story structure and beats and more about finding that passion within and finding the desire to write and creating something you love.
My answer to that is, as an actor, I would never want a director telling me how to act. So as a mentor in this program, I'm not going to tell you how to write. If you ask me for a suggestion on craft books, I have them. And I have things that I'll point you to. But yeah, I really think that, if you're a writer and you have things that work for you, trust your gut. You don't need me to tell you read a million books while you're rewriting your book. But if you feel like, hey, I need work here, I've read craft books, and I also use my acting technique a lot in my writing, and I can talk to you about that too. But I'm not going to start off with giving you homework.
I have suggestions. Yeah, I really like Anatomy of Story, but it's so dependent on the author. And a lot of times I'll recommend, other young adult books to maybe, if they have already read again from a craft perspective. Like if somebody wanted multiple point of views with strong voices for each character, I've recommended before, like Ember in the Ashes. So just kind of something like that, like what we want to work on with their book. There's usually a book that does it super, super well that I might recommend them to read again from a craft perspective or read for the first time.
I will add that I agree with that. I will probably suggest books that are comps to your book to read. But if you're specifically talking about like how to write, probably, I'm not going to suggest that right off the bat.
Sorry, I thought Annette still had to go, but I forgot she went first. So one of my favorite, I mentioned it just like a couple minutes ago, is a Print Run podcast. And that's more about the publishing industry itself, but they do have writing tips on there as well. a lot of times when someone is experiencing some issues with pacing, I recommend Save the Cat. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the best. For me, I use it as a diagnostic tool for pacing. I don't necessarily use it to plot ahead of time, but and I love Janice Hardy's blog. She has the Writers University blog, and that's got so many great posts about different craft topics, which a lot of the blogs that you see tend to focus a lot on like the business side of publishing, whereas Writers University is pretty hardcore focused on the craft. And she's got some really just great like things that just break down to the bare bones of different topics. So, all right. So I don't know if we have anyone. Do any of y'all work on graphic novels? Yeah. So I don't know if we're going to be able to answer this question on this chat. But I would recommend for the person asking this is to go to the mentor wish list and see who is accepting graphic novels and ask them this question directly. So it's what word counts are being accepted for graphic novels, science fiction, fantasy in particular. Yeah, I don't think any of us have an insight. No. Okay. So I would definitely recommend going to those mentors who have graphic novels on their wish list and asking them, because they're going to be more knowledgeable about that than we are. Okay, Link. We have another question about titles. What if you have a lame working title? Mention that it's not working, or just pretend you're serious about it and submit for now. I will say, you worry about this, but I've received some submissions with like really truly terrible titles and the author was serious about them. So like, don't feel bad about it.
Just name that book Pork Chop and keep moving forward. Just pretend you're serious about it.
Yeah, we've got you. Don't worry about it. And sometimes getting a fresh perspective on your manuscript will help lead to a new title.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah. For the book I am currently writing, I was at 75,000 words before I had a title for it. So I just called it Picasso, which is like the main character's last name. Okay. We have a question. How do you feel about younger main characters? Is it a deal breaker for you? I think, Adalyn, you had mentioned on the Twitter chat yesterday that your specialty is older YA, right? So it definitely depends.
Sorry. It depends how young. But for me in particular, I would say that I'm best with upper young adult and more mature themes. So it's probably really just mentor dependent. I'm sure that there are plenty, if you read through their wish list, that they either don't say anything, which I assume then would probably be open to young. You can ask them and clarify, but unless they really specifically, like I do, say that they're better with upper young adult, I think it's probably fine.
Yeah, I'd say just check on your themes too to make sure that if they're young, you're not actually writing MG. And if you need more clarification, definitely ask the mentors on Twitter or on the discussion boards for clarification.
Yeah, same answer. Like, it doesn't really make a difference to me. Like one of my work in progresses is about seniors in high school, and then the other one is about sophomores. So it really just depends.
All right. My light is changing quite a bit because we have a thunderstorm rolling through. Hopefully we don't lose internet. If we lose internet, y'all just keep talking, okay? If I lose internet, rather. All right. This is probably going to be the last question for this set of mentors. Rachel asks, if a writer knows their book needs some work, like characterization, plot, word building, would you still recommend they submit to Pitchwars?
Yeah, we're not looking for perfect books. Sorry, Kyle, I'll let you go first this time. I keep jumping in.
We're not looking for perfect books, to reiterate that. Yeah, so I think that world building, characterization, stuff like that, that's all things that we're gonna work on. usually manuscripts that need work have like an awesome plot or hook or an ending, and everything else in between is really what we're going to work on in that developmental round of edits. So yeah, I think, you know, the risk of submitting to pitch wars is very low. Honestly, like if you don't get picked, you don't get picked. If you get picked, it's awesome. It's not really a reflection of you because all of us only get to choose one writer. So my my basic advice on pitch wars is pick a mentor who you really like. Don't worry about how many submissions you think they're going to get, because nobody has any clue how many submissions each mentor is going to get. Submit to them and see what happens, because somebody does get picked by each mentor, and you never know if it's going to be you. So don't worry so much about like, is my manuscript ready? We're going to help you get it ready.
Yeah, like Sarah said earlier, Pitch Wars isn't about the agent showcase. That's the cherry on top. And so if you need help with characterization or world building or story arcs, that's why you're entering Pitch Wars. So go through the wish list, see which mentors have those strengths and submit to them, and they're the ones who will help you get to the next level.
I also feel like, kind of echoing what everybody else is saying, if you don't feel like it needs any work and you feel like you're just ready to query, then query. You don't need pitch wars. Like pitch wars is about the mentorship. If you're just looking for the agent showcase, like why wait? Like go send queries to the agents. I cold queried. That worked for me. It works for so many people. So yeah, don't wait for pitch wars if you're only looking for the agent showcase. If you know you need work, then that's what pitch wars is all about.
Yeah, I forgot how to talk for a second. I did want to say, we've seen a couple of times where people will say in the query, you know, well, I know the characterization needs work, I know the world building needs work, that kind of thing. And I would actually caution you against saying that, because one, no one is ever going to love your book as much as you love it. So if it seems like you don't like it, then the mentor doesn't have a lot of motivation to invest in it. And then two is, if the mentor disagrees with you and they think that it's actually something else that they want to work on, then it's like a whole like sales technique, sales mindset, right? Is they're already saying no in their head before they even really get into it. And so you never want to start off a sales pitch with someone saying no inside their head, right? So just I would caution against putting anything like that in the query. And I've seen it before where someone has said, "Oh, I really want to, you know, change this with your help," and I'm like, I don't think that needs changed at all. So I'm just going to pass on something that I might otherwise be interested in, because I feel like we're going to clash there, you know. All right, so if the mentors that we have on right now could just in their outro, just tell us where we can find you online, and if you have anything coming up that you want us to know about, like a giveaway or like a book coming out or like a video or whatever, Kyle, that you're releasing. So we'll start with Kyle.
All right, so Brendan and I are doing videos pretty much every Monday. If we're going to skip a Monday, we'll let you know ahead of time. I'm going to be running giveaways all of Pitch Wars. So even after we've chosen our mentee, we're still going to try and be giving everyone else a reason to stay tuned and stay involved in Pitch Wars, because it is a community. So I'm going to be giving away query critiques, first page critiques. Right now I have a synopsis critique going on. You can just follow me on Twitter at Kyle T. Cowan, literally for all social media. Follow me, stay in touch. I'm happy to respond to you via @. I don't respond to DMs typically unless I initiate the DM, just so you know. So yeah, good luck to you. I hope you submit to us. We really look forward to reading your work. I can't wait.
You can follow Sonia and I on Twitter. I'm at Miss Annette MC. And I want to give a little plug for her book, Have a Little Faith in Me, which came out September 3rd, which is, I mean, just gorgeous and funny and brilliant. And I highly recommend it. And my debut comes out fall 2020 on Audible Originals. It's called Dear Nemesis.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. They're different handles because social media hates me. Twitter is Adalyn Grace _ and Instagram is author Adalyn Grace. In February, my book is coming out. It is this beautiful blue book right here. It's called All the Stars and Teeth. And yeah, follow me on Instagram if you want to see me be dramatic, and on Twitter if you want me to actually be a normal person.
All right, so I am going to switch the screen over to all the schedule of all the Twitter and video chats while we get the mentors switched over. So thank you all for joining us, and you can find all of them on different social media channels. All right. All right, so we have 4 mentors who have just joined us. So I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves individually. I already introduced myself, so I won't do it again. You can rewind if you want to see that. And we are going to start with Abigail.
There we go. Am I unmuted? Can you guys hear
You're
me?
good.
Oh, good. Hi. So I'm Abigail Johnson, and I write contemporary YA. I have 3 books out right now, and my 4th book is called Every Other Weekend, and it'll be coming out in January. I think I have it. Yeah, can you guys see this? So this one will be coming out on January 7th, and it's about a boy and a girl who meet and fall in kind of messy, complicated love during the weekends that they are forced to spend with their dads who happen to live in next door apartments. So yeah, that comes out in January.
All right, Andrea, you are next.
Hi, I'm Andrea Contos. I am a mystery thriller writer. I was a mentee in 2017, and Annette, who you just saw a couple minutes ago, actually was one of my mentors. And then last year I was a mentor, and back this year, obviously. I'm repped by Sarah Davies of Greenhouse Lit, and I have my big debut, Throwaway Girls, which comes out in fall of 2020.
Jenna.
I'm Jenna Lincoln. I have a trilogy published in young adult science fiction with Kissing, and I have been working my way slowly into crime fiction. So I love to write and read all things genre.
And Sasha.
Hi, I'm Sasha Peyton Smith. I am a historical fantasy author. This year I am co-mentoring with the fabulous Kristen Lambert. I am represented by Hillary Jacobson at ICM. And I have a book that I can't tell anybody anything about, but hopefully that will change soon. Should I keep going? I can keep talking about myself.
No, I did mention earlier, sometimes when I try to switch views, it sticks. And so if there's like an awkward pause, that's what's happening. All right, yeah. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove the logo off of Andrea's head since you can see it on the others. Once I figure out how to do that. There we go. Okay. So we're just we have questions that were submitted. We're at 12:45 right now, the questions that we're looking at. And so we're just going to dive right in. And it is funny that that Sasha is on the same chat as Adalyn, because y'all do look very much alike.
And we have the same agent. We were at Y'all Fest last year, and people kept confused. It's like Adalyn. There's like, no, I'm Sasha. And they'd go up to her and they'd be like, Sasha. And she'd be like, no, I'm Adalyn.
All right. Yeah, it was a little, because y'all are like in the same spot too.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question for y'all is from KR. With regards to the main character, what age range do you consider to be young adult? Will university characters of about 20 years old classify as YA if the overall themes are young adult?
I can start.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, if the overall themes are young adult, if it's the shedding the myths of childhood and moving into, young adulthood, then it's something that I'd be willing to consider. I think my big question would be, why is your main character 20? If the themes are very young adult, why not make them a freshman? Why not age them down to 17 or 18? So that's something I'd want to discuss, but it would not be an automatic no for me. It's probably just something I'd want to talk about more.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we're starting to see a couple college set YAs, which, to me kind of feels like NA by another term, but I think we're kind of maybe trying to bridge that gap that's been out there for a long time. And who knows, that could be something that becomes more and more popular. But kind of like Sasha said, I think we'd probably want to talk about it and see if it makes sense for the book, see if the characters really have a reason for being at that, age. But I wouldn't say no based just on a 20-year-old in a YA book.
Just quick, I'll add to what they're saying. So what we're seeing in the market is most middle grade and young adult kind of being split into thirds by age, right? So this would be the top third of YA, those books that are edging up into what's sort of next after high school. But if your main character is 20 at university, I would be curious if there's a cast that has, they're connected back to their teenage self, high school, et cetera. And then I agree with my other mentors that we might have a conversation about university, because sometimes what happens is not everyone goes to university. They join the army or they are working, and then those themes might be more appropriate even though they're 20, if that makes sense. So like these ladies said, I think we would talk it over.
All right. Is that everyone gets a chance to speak? Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was thinking of like Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, it's college set, and I would consider that YA. But yeah, similarly, I would probably want to discuss why we might not want to just, shed a year or two off that just to see if it would still work. But we would just have a discussion about it if that was the case for whatever book it was.
Yeah, I do feel like most of the college set YA I've read have been freshmen. Okay. So Brittany asks, if a manuscript has a strong voice and you really enjoy the character/world, but the first pages have some telling rather than showing, which the mentor would love help fixing, would you be turned off? And I did want to say, Brittany has tuned into like almost every video chat. So I just want to say thank you for tuning in and asking questions. We really appreciate it.
I can go here. So if it has strong character, strong world, all those good things, when I'm going to be looking at, which manuscript to pick, I'm looking at everything together. So if one thing is maybe a little lacking, but everything else is really compelling, then I'm going to be inclined to say, oh, there's so much here, we can work on this. So, obviously you want the pages to be great from the beginning, but if there's one thing that needs work and everything else is strong, then that's going to weigh into my decision of, okay, we can work on this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of the magic of pitchwars, is that every book that we take on is going to need something. Otherwise, you wouldn't need us, and you could just go query, and then you wouldn't need the contest at all. So no, that would not be a turnoff. That's absolutely something we can work on, and kind of the point of what we do here. It's going to be characterization, or it's going to be, your prose. It could be any number of things. So certainly not something that would prevent me from looking at it.
Probably someone's talked about this, but a lot of times if that's what you're already seeing in your book, you're getting that feedback, it might just be that your story's starting in the wrong place. That's a really common thing. The book that I'm querying right now, we cut the first 3 pages off and all of a sudden, yep, that's where the story started. So I think that could be something to look at too. And just, in fact, my editor called it literary throat clearing, the first 2 to 3 pages. So that might be what's going on too. But anyway, they said, we're here to help you with that. And we look at everything that you send to us, not just one part. So just those pages would not be a reason to say no, especially considering everything that you submitted.
Yeah, I totally agree with what everybody else said. I think definitely don't self-reject from pitch wars, especially over something as minor as telling rather than showing in your first couple of pages. That's something that is fixable. I also think that telling rather than showing sometimes gets a really, really bad rap. Sometimes you just need to tell your audience something. And I think there's clever ways around it, and there's ways to make your prose pretty. But like sometimes you just have to say something and not write around a moment so much, and that's okay. Give yourself a little bit of slack.
Every good chance? Okay. Adalyn says, Sasha and I are twins.
I'm honored. She's so beautiful.
Oh, goodness. It's going to be a novel in a year, like the twins that meet at a writer convention.
We're gonna parent trap our agent.
Yeah. All right. Ann Turtle asks, how important is writing style for you in a synopsis? Do you want it to sound pretty, or is it purely about giving a proper summary of the full novel?
Okay, I can go here again. Synopsises are evil. They are. They're just a mess. Nobody likes writing. Well, I kind of do like writing them, actually. But I know that that's not typical for most people. Do not stress over your synopsis. At least in my case, I just want to know what happens in the book. We can work on it later and make it all shiny and pretty for when you are taking it out to agents. But for pitch wars, for me, I just want to know what happens in your story. I'm going to look at your pages to be able to tell if you can write well and all that kind of stuff. So don't stress about your synopsis. At least not for me. I don't mind. We'll work on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. A synopsis is, I just want to know what happens in your book. I don't want to invest, hours of my day reading a 400-page epic that takes place in this beautiful historical world that ends with them jetting off to start a new colony on Jupiter. Like, I just, you need to know that the story is going in a way that makes sense. And if you can convey that in your synopsis, I don't care how pretty it is. I really just want to know what happens.
Ditto. Synopsis are hard. There's a famous, Julianne Walker calls them the suckopsis, and I think that feels like that. I've had to write a short version because some people want short and some people want like a full synopsis, which is maybe like 6 to 8 pages, and that's just hard all the way around. But I'm not looking for pretty there. I'm looking for what happens in your book.
Yeah, agreed. It's hard to get an entire book in a single page, which is what you need for this contest. So don't sacrifice your plot and your story for pretty words, because it's not going to do you any good in this one. Leave the pretty words for the book.
All right. Yeah, when I first started out, I didn't really think about synopses. And then I think it was the first or second year, I read almost an entire full manuscript, and I got like 70% in, and the genre completely changed. And like, it was just like a complete U-turn. And that's when I started requesting synopsis for every full that I requested, because I would like to know that before I spend like hours reading it, All right. So Janelle asks, how does living in Canada differ from the States as far as getting an agent or publisher? And then Anne also added to that, she said, what about living in Europe? Is that considered a problem for the US market? So I would like to say that Pitch Wars, the focus of Pitch Wars is on the American book market. But we do have mentors from all over the world, and we do have mentees from all over the world. But as long as you're interested in being published in the American book market, then you are definitely welcome in Pitch Wars, but I will let our mentors expand on that. We had one chat the other day that there were 2 Canadians on, so I feel like
well, she missed this. Annette's Canadian, so we could have asked her like half an hour ago. So I'm far from an expert on this, and this is probably going to be a very, very vague answer, but my agent happens to be British. She splits her time between London and the US, and I can honestly say it's really made no difference. I mean, there's emails, there's phones, and so much is done over those type of mediums that I'm not sure it really makes a huge difference in terms of being able to communicate. And I have some friends that are in other countries and have agents that work in the US. So, I mean, obviously there's probably going to be tax differences, and there's going to, you know, be all those details that I am not going to even try and talk about because I don't know what I'm saying. But I think you shouldn't worry too much about whether or not somebody's going to see your submission, see that you live in another country, and write off your manuscript.
Yeah, I know that my agent has at least one client who lives in Australia. The way you sell books, you sell via market. It doesn't really matter where the author themselves lives. Like Andrea said, it might make taxes kind of weird. I don't know a lot about that. But as far as selling goes, it's often that agents will sell either North American rights or World English rights, so your book will make it to Canada anyway. And then you typically have a foreign rights agent that will sell your book in other markets for language translations or other versions. If you sell North American rights, for example, then you will likely have a foreign rights agent that sells your UK rights. But again, it doesn't really matter where the author lives. It's all just about how the book itself is sold.
Yeah, I'm an American, so I don't have too much insight on all this, but I do know that I'm represented by Kim Lionetti from Bookends, and their policy, and they were just talking about this, I think, on Twitter or even a blog post, just like, wherever you live, write a good book. Doesn't matter.
Jenna, you're muted.
I was just saying, I don't have anything to add. All I have is a dear friend who's lived in 13 countries and she's been writing and publishing. And I think her publisher and her books benefited from that wealth and breadth of experience, and it didn't impact her publishing journey.
And I know we got this question in a couple other video chats, so I'm just going to go ahead and answer it now. The question was, are mentors going to care if you have like British or Australian spellings? And my answer was, I feel confident in our mentor selection process that we've selected mentors who know what British spellings are and that you're not just like misspelling words over and over again. So yeah, that's totally fine. I hope so. I feel like we did a good job there. Okay, so Lee had asked this question earlier, and I did say that if they had questions that they wanted to make sure the second round of mentors answered, that they could ask again. So this is a repeat question from earlier. So if you're just tuning in and you want to see the other mentors' answers to this question as well, make sure you go back and rewatch the beginning of this video. But the question is, if an author whose manuscript you're considering participates in DV Pitt the last week of October, will that affect your decision when choosing a mentee, asking again for the new mentors? So I might be the only mean one, but you guys go ahead. We'll start with Abigail. Do you have anything to add?
You know, I haven't thought about it too much. I kind of, when does it overlap exactly? Sarah, do you know?
It seems like DV Pitt is in one of the final weeks of consideration. So right around the time you're going to be like picking
Before
someone,
you choose
basically.
somebody. I mean, no, I don't think it would bother me. As long as it's before we pick, you know, and as soon as if you do end up doing that and something happens at it, if you let us know ahead of time. If you were like my front runner or something, I would be bummed, of course, to lose you, but yay for you. So I think I'd be okay with it.
Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't bother me. I mean, theoretically, people can have queries out at the point that they're submitting anyway, so that it's always a possibility that somebody could get it. And plus, then I'd have to go back through and like find every single person that participated in DV Pitt. But I think in the end, the point is to try and get the agent and to move ahead. So if that were to happen, good for you. Be very happy for them. And kind of like Abigail said, sad if that was your final person, but no, I wouldn't automatically disqualify somebody just for participating.
Yeah, I think that DV Pitt is amazing. I think it's an incredible program, or I guess pitch contest. I don't know if it qualifies as a full program. But Phelan is amazing. I will say that, yeah, if I were to see that my front runner got like a bunch of agent attention on a post, then I would have to think about it. And I'd probably connect with them because if you're going to get selected for pitch wars and you have a bunch of fulls out or you have a bunch of manuscripts out, then I'll likely ask you to email those agents if you're comfortable and say that you've been selected as a pitch wars mentee. Most agents are familiar with pitch wars and just ask if they'd be willing to wait for the updated manuscript. I don't think any agent has ever had an issue with that. Usually they're excited to see the manuscript that's a little bit shinier and more polished. So yeah, I think that it could put the potential mentee in an awkward spot where if they got all this attention, they'd have to put the brakes on, and they might not be willing to do that. In which case, yay for you, get an agent, it's going to be amazing. But I would be sad as a mentor to potentially lose you. But the chances of getting picked as a YA or as a pitch wars mentee are tight. It's competitive, so I don't want people to lose out on other opportunities and put all of their eggs in the pitch wars basket when there could be the perfect agent out there for them that sees them through this pit. So yeah, it's not going to be an automatic no. But if I saw you got a ton of attention, I might be kind of sad because I realize you might get signed with an agent before I can pick you as my mentee.
So I think this question is a lot about your readiness as an author, like where you're at with your book, where you're at in your career as far as moving forward. So I think in the first hour, people talked about, you're really ready, go do that. Like, that's awesome. And like the other mentor said, like, I think you kind of know this, you've been watching the pitch wars hashtag or looking at our wish list, but for me, like committing to my mentee and a mentee's book is a full body, like full soul commitment. And so behind the scenes, when we lose mentees for various reasons, we're all really sad, right? So I know you're not like, well, I don't want to make you sad. That's not a reason not to do it. It's really at the end of the day about how you feel ready and where you feel like you and your book are.
Okay, we have another question. What would you tell your younger self that you wish you knew now when it comes to querying? And I'm actually going to leave this screen for a second, so y'all just don't evolve into chaos while I'm gone. I'll be right back.
Is this where we devolve into chaos?
Chaos.
My younger self, I would probably say to not overthink things too much. That's kind of my hallmark personality trait. But, I would agonize over where do I put the information on my query? Do I, put it at the beginning or the end? And, what's an acceptable introduction in terms of, what is an agent going to like versus does they think that this is sucking up if I say I really like their podcast? And it can really just kind of get in your head. And then you start panicking over the smallest little things. Trust me, if your book is good and your agent and the agent reads it and they connect with the writing and they connect with the query and it piques their interest, that little stuff is just not going to make a difference. Now, should you do your due diligence and make sure that you're using correct pronouns, using correct names? Absolutely, 100%. So I'm not trying to argue that you shouldn't do your research, but just agents are humans too, and they will understand if there's a typo in your query. That's not gonna automatically disqualify you. So do absolutely look it over a million times, yes, but don't overthink it too much. Don't work yourself into a frenzy over the little things. Focus on writing the good book. Focus on writing the hooky query.
Yeah. Sarah, you missed all the chaos, but we're good now.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I just totally forgot what the question was. What were we talking about? Problems with queries. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I definitely had those moments where I would stress out when I realized that I had there was a typo in the query. And I was like, well, they're never going to read it now. And of course that never happened. One thing that I sort of realized, I'm sure you guys do this too. I spent hours and hours and hours researching to find a personalization that I could put in my query. And ultimately when I went, yeah, you did that too. Yeah. And I know that when I ended up going back through and looking at my queries, there was no difference between the ones that I spent, super personalizing and the ones that were just like, I hope you're, I think I almost ended up getting better requests from ones that weren't personalized. So I know about halfway through, I stopped doing the over personalization unless there was something super connecting me to an agent. Otherwise I was just like, here's what my book's about, So I think a lot of people stress a little too much about finding that thing, that personalization, and I feel like a lot of agents don't need that. So don't beat yourself up if you can't find that connection, you know, and it's just like, hey, this agent represents so-and-so, and I like their books. That's enough. That's fine. You're good to go. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so I am a jerk, and I never traditionally queried. I never queried before I applied to pitchwars. I had 0 queries out. I had been too afraid to even tweet at an agent.
Can we kick Sasha out of the chat now?
Yeah, you guys, I gotta go. And so I did pitchwars. I was mentored by Heather Cashman and Michael George, and they were amazing. And I got pretty good feedback and a number of requests on my pitchwar showcase. And then from there, I was able to send out the full manuscripts to those who had requested them. So it all happened pretty quickly. But I will say my piece of query advice is, one, not to beat yourself up too much about the query letter. I think pitchwar showcase is like a little bit different, but I still feel like my query letter was not good. And I was laughing with my agent after I signed with her about my query letter, and I expected her to be like, no, it was so great. I loved it. It's totally why I signed you. And she was like, yeah, it wasn't great. Okay. But my advice for queriers is, I'm not a believer in the send out 100 queries before you give up on a project. I think that the right agent is really important. And I think that no agent is worse than a bad agent or an agent who isn't the right fit for you. So think really, really hard about querying agents that you would sign with if they offered. I think that you don't want to waste agents' time by throwing queries out there if you know that you wouldn't accept their representation. Yeah, so when I ended up sending out my fulls, I really was very, very cognizant of only sending them to agents that I knew that I'd be pretty thrilled to sign with.
When I finished my first book, I had been doing that completely alone. I didn't have a critique group. I didn't really have any writing friends. And this is a true story. I didn't know you could go to a writing conference without finishing a manuscript first. I really thought they'd be like, okay, show it to us, like before I walked in the door. And so that's one lesson learned. No, I was really like, and then I was in a session and people were like, well, I have an idea. And I was like, what? You can come to this with like an idea? Anyway, so what I would tell my younger self is, find some writing friends who are in the same place in the process as you are. Because I think about those original queries and I just didn't even know who to ask for feedback. And my life is so enriched by my writer friends and by the pitchwars community that I'm just happy for the people that are finding it at this point in their career, because that makes a difference. Having writing friends who are like going to tell you, no, let's change up that query a little bit. You know, it's made it, yeah, find friends, trust them.
Can I give myself 2 pieces of advice? All right. Eyes on your own paper. Everybody's journey is not the same. It is very, very, very easy when you are querying, even if you're getting full requests, but until you feel like you've reached that I got this agent offer stage, it's incredibly easy to start doubting yourself and to watch other people sort of move ahead and you feel like you're getting left behind. And it's a very, very short walk to, I'm just awful at this and I'm never going to get there and I should just give up. And so when we say everybody has their own journey, it really is the truth. And I know that there are people, friends of mine who are just as good, if not better writers than me, who don't have agents. So sometimes it's just a whole lot of luck. It's the market, it's the book, it's a whole bunch of things. So stick to what you're doing, write what you love, and don't get too caught up in where everybody else is at, because you never know where you're going to go from, a string of rejections to that agent offer that leads to a book deal within a month. And then people who had an agent 6 months ago are still on 7 waiting. So as best as you can, try and focus on you and know that whatever's supposed to happen is going to happen. And it's not always a reflection of your talent.
I would just add too, one, not to like contradict and keep your eyes on your own paper. Yes, do that, but also look at other people's queries. One of the best things I did for when I knew there was an agent I wanted to query, I would clients had posted my successful query, and then I would look at that and say, oh, did they do an introduction? Did they do a, what was the structure of their query? And then I could pattern mine after that. So definitely look for queries that were successful. I know I have mine on my blog. You can just search for my successful query if you want to query Kim Lionetti at Bookends, but just look for whoever, find one that they liked, and then you can kind of use that as a template for yourself.
Also, the minute you send out your queries, start on another project, you will drive yourself insane if you go back and you're editing the same project that you're querying over and over again, or if you are just sitting there refreshing your inbox. You are not one project. This is not the only book you'll ever write. Start on something else. It'll keep your mind off it. It'll make you a better writer. And if for some reason that's not the right book for the right market or the right agent, then you have something else to send out. Truly the only way to fail is to give up. And I really believe that.
All right, I was looking at the live broadcast and I was like, wow, it's way behind, but I realized I had paused it. And so I wasn't actually watching the live broadcast. So I was very confused. I was like, why is it still showing Kyle? All right, Lee had a clarification for us. DV Pit is October 28th. So that is like a really just kind of super awkward time because that is basically when all the mentors are going to either have decided on their mentee or very, very close to deciding on their mentee. And so that's just kind of, I think you have to have like a real conversation with yourself about whether or not if you get requests during DV Pit and you get an offer of representation a month or two later and someone has chosen you as a mentee, and are you going to accept it at that time, or that kind of thing. So that's obviously a very personal thing, and everyone's going to have kind of different opinion there. Jenna, real quick, do you if someone has a clarifying question about your wish list, how do you want them to contact you? You're muted.
Okay, so on my wish list on my blog, there is a place for comment, and I will answer questions publicly on my blog. That's probably the best way, because you might be not the only person that has that question. That way I can answer it for everyone. If that's okay with you, that would be the best way to do it. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a question for Jenna, and I'm going to skip it for a variety of reasons. So we actually are caught up on questions at this time. So I'm actually going to go back to the questions that were asked near the beginning, and we'll ask y'all those questions. But first, I wanted to ask my question. I was really surprised it hasn't really been asked yet, is what are your tips for a compelling, successful query letter?
Focus on the stakes. It's probably one of the things that I see most just in, critiquing queries. They always get a little fuzzy at the end. Like everybody always wants the big censure sentence at the end, and it gets real fuzzy sometimes in terms of what it is that's truly at stake in the book. So to me, that's one of the big things. You want to know about your character. You want to know what they want. You want to know what's standing in their way. And this is the big thing. What happens if they fail? So you want to answer that question. You want to have it because that's the crux of your book, right? We want to know exactly what's going to happen if your character doesn't get what they want, if they don't succeed in what they're doing. So that to me is a big one. Think about what their final decision is, or what's going to happen overall if they don't end up achieving their goals. So just make sure that's really clear, because that's the thing that's going to hook. That's the thing that's going to make the person, the agent or the mentor go, well, I want to know. I want to find out the answer to that question. I want to see what happens and what choice they make. So to me, that's a big one.
Yeah, for me, I know that it's hard within the word limit. I don't know. But I think that make it as specific as you possibly can. There are a million books that fall into a girl doesn't know she's a princess and she's got to save her kingdom, and if she doesn't, everybody dies. But what makes your book interesting, what makes it different, it's those details that are going to make me want to read more. And it's those details that help me to realize that it's not like anything else I've ever read. If you make any book synopsis vague enough, they all sound boring. So what makes it different? So try to add those specifics, try to add that cool world building you've done, the characterization that you've done. If you've done the work in your manuscript, then take the query as an opportunity to talk about those things.
So I was at Thriller Fest this summer and got to participate and watch in Pitch Fest there. And some of the advice that I got that was really helpful was around, and you guys kind of know this, but putting those power words in the query. So a word like secrets, a word like fame, a word like billionaire, words that are really going to zoom in on the thing that you're talking about. The other advice that I got that was really funny was, this is a guy I met actually through Pitchwars. He was saying how if you talk about your book is about everything breaks down in a theme park and then a lot of people die, and then you're like, oh, but there's dinosaurs. He's like, you have to start with the dinosaurs because it's Jurassic Park. So the first thing you talk about is the dinosaurs, and then you're like in a theme park where everything goes wrong and people die. And I was like, oh yeah, start with the dinosaurs. That's really good advice. So I'm passing it on to you guys.
Yeah, I don't have really much more to add to that. I think you guys all answered those brilliantly. Definitely, you want stakes, you want specificity, and you want the cool thing about your story. Don't save that for the end. Lead with what's going to be hooky and interesting. So.
This is one thing that I've been noticing recently in the query critiques that I've been doing is you need to make sure that it's clear that your main character is active in their own story. I read a lot of queries where it's like, this happens to this person and she's forced to do this and she never makes a decision or, does anything on her own in the entire query. And that makes it seem like she may not do anything on her own in the entire book, which makes for a boring book. So you want to use the active language and the active phrasing. So since I said that we didn't have any questions, a lot of people are like, oh, I should ask a question. So we actually have questions now. And if you are watching on Twitter, I said this at the beginning, but I want to make sure people hear it. If you're watching this on Twitter, make sure you click through to YouTube and ask the questions in the live chat there. That's where we're taking the questions from. So Mary asks, what makes you decide to request a full manuscript from a potential mentee?
I'll go here because I know this was. If I'm going to request, I'm always going to request the full. I'm not going to request a partial. I want the whole thing. But for me, the thing I look for the most is I want to be emotionally invested in your protagonist. I care about the interesting storyline, but mostly I want to care if good or bad things happen to him or her. If they're making smart decisions, bad decisions, I want to be in it with them. I want to be connected to their heart and their journey. And if you can do that as soon as possible, then I'm going to go with them wherever they're going, and with you. So, yeah.
I mean, probably a million different things. If you read my wish list, you will see that there are about 10 billion things that I love and am excited about. So for me, I think the big puzzle piece is going to be premise. I want to be really, really excited about what your book is about, because if I'm your mentor, then I'm going to spend a lot of time in that world with you. And I want to be excited when I sit down to work on your manuscript with you. And the good news is there are a billion things that I'm excited about. Character, for sure, like Abigail said, sentence at a prose level. I love getting really lost in people's writing and how they formulate sentences. If your plot isn't perfect, that's okay. Like, truly, I rewrote probably 60% of my book back when I was a Pitchwars mentee. I changed my villain. I changed my magic system. So much changed. But my mentor told me that she loved my premise and she loved my writing and she loved my character. And for me, now that I'm a mentor, it's those three things for me as well.
I'm going to say thumbs up to premise also, because I'm really thoughtfully thinking about this in the moment, because I'm thinking about the different fulls I've requested in the last 2 years. And it was really all the things and the idea of the book. I was really excited about where that book was going to go. And I really wanted to know more what happened. So those are the times that I requested a full, because I was like, ooh, and I was connected to the characters and I liked kind of what I thought was going to happen. And that's why I needed to read more.
So this is probably the worst sort of non-answer, but any number of things. It can be the voice, it can be the character, it can be the premise, it could be something really cool plot twist-wise that I see in the query or the synopsis. It's really just about something that piques my interest, something I connect with, which is, I'm sorry, really, really vague and probably not very helpful, but that's the truth.
All right. Molly asks, what makes a compelling hook / first page for you?
The best advice I ever read on a first chapter is it should occur the day that your main character's life changes. I think that Red Queen does this really, really well. She does a little bit of setup on what the main character's daily life looks like, and then the first chapter goes right into what changes it. So I think focus on that. And that it's tricky to do because we have to know your character and we have to know what their daily life is and we have to know what changes it. But I think that that's a really good test to kind of figure out where your book starts. And I don't really care what it is that changes it, but I think that that's the hook that I'm looking for.
There's a romantic suspense writer named Mary Burton, and she says her books start 5 minutes before everything goes wrong, which I think is a really cool way to think about it. But the first book I mentored for Pitchwars was an en media res book. So we literally dropped right into the action and watched our main character do her truly horrible job, which is what the book was about. She had to track down the ghosts of serial killers. And so I like both those openings. I like to see what the main character is already doing and has to do and why they're struggling and where they're going to change from here. But I like 5 minutes before everything goes wrong. I think that's a cool role to live by.
Yeah, I think we're all going to kind of say the similar thing here, because that is, you want the story to start where it actually starts, where it gets interesting, where the thing happens that ruins things or starts off the course for everything. So it's fiddle with that too. I've read a lot, and last year I had a lot of submissions that I could tell, it's like, okay, this is not where the story starts. It starts actually on page 20 or whatever. Or my first book, my actual story started on page 90, my first draft of it, which was my first Pitchwars book, which became my first published novel. So we can work on that and find out where does your story start. But it starts where the story starts, where things happen and interesting, terrible things begin.
Yeah, I want to connect with your main character, and I want to know what their goal is, and I want to be invested in whether or not they achieve it. So to me, if you can make that happen, if you can make me in some way connect with that person and care about what happens to them, then I'm sold.
I also think we should know what they want pretty quickly in the book. If it's safety, if it's a family, if it's, a meal on the table in the next 2 hours, we should know that they want something pretty quickly on in the manuscript.
Andrea, what does your cat think, though?
He's just very happy that the dog is downstairs and he can't torment him, so he's enjoying the peace and quiet.
Oh,
Jack likes the characters too, don't you, buddy?
My cat's been making appearances on the chats, but I'm actually at my sister's house today, so my cat won't be here today, unfortunately, for any Athena fans out there. All right, so the next question is, how do you all feel about younger YA main characters?
I want to see this done well. I'm excited about this. I feel like I was saying earlier, there's these thirds in the market, and because I work in schools, I feel like there's a gap right now in the oldest of middle grade and the youngest of YA. You can see a lot of the sort of the middle third and the upper third of YA, especially in fantasy and suspense. But I would love to see this do well. So please do it well and send it to me.
I love it for the market. I want to see it do really, really well. I think that there's a gap. I think that there's readers that aren't being met, that are at like the 14, 13, 15-year-old range. I think as a mentor, me and Kristen both tend to gravitate towards older YA. Both of our books are fairly gritty. They both deal with older YA characters. So I don't know if I'm the mentor for it, but I do want to see it do well. So please write it and please sell it. And I want to see it on my shelf.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to younger YA main characters. I've read some really good ones. I just recently read Momentous Events in the Life of a Cactus by Dusty Bowling, and it's a sequel to a middle grade novel. So the character is older in this one. She started out in high school, and it was brilliant, breathtakingly brilliant, and I loved it. And I want to see more books that bridge that gap. So I'm open to it.
Yeah, I'd be open to seeing it too. I have a 10-year-old who definitely reads up, so I do think there is sort of a gap between that, upper MG and lower YA. So I would love to see anything that deals with. I'm probably not the right person for younger YA with super duper fluffy sort of plot lines. But if you give me something that's got heart, I would love to see that.
Okay, Brenna asks, do you have any advice for finding a happy medium between too much explanation and just enough?
Get critique partners. Sometimes it's really, really hard to tell in your own writing. So get critique partners, get writing partners that you trust. And one, I think reading other people's work and learning how to critique other people's work makes you a better writer. It certainly made me a better writer. I learned how books were structured. I learned how pacing worked. And I really learned that through reading other people's work. It's hard to sometimes view your own work objectively. So a lot of that comes from a critique partner, I think, who can highlight a big section of your work and say, yo, I love this, we don't need it. Like, great writing, but we got this explanation 3 pages ago. Yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice. Find a writing partner you trust.
Yeah, I think if you focus on what the reader absolutely needs to know in that moment and try and keep it focused on that, that goes a long way. And it's really, really tough in the beginning chapters of books, because sometimes we feel like everything needs to be crammed in the middle, or people are going to be lost and they're not going to understand. But I mean, if you have to, make a list. Go through and say, if I were reading this book, here are the things that I would absolutely 100% need to know in order to be able to follow along. And then keep yourself to that. Maybe you add a little bit in towards the end if people are kind of confused, but sort of if you start small and work bigger, I find it's easier than throwing everything in there and trying to cut it down to make it more manageable.
So I would also kind of think about the mentor text you're using. So one way to look would be to compare like a brand new, fresh out science fiction novel like The Disasters by M.K. England, who's a former pitchwars mentor, to something like Marion Zimmer Bradley, from the 80s. How those two writers world build completely different. And what MK does is get you just what you need to know, like Andrea was saying, so you can picture the world, but really you're focusing on the story and the characters. So I would say, along with critique partners, look at books that have just come out in the genre that you're writing in and see how those published authors are world building and how much is actually on the page and how much they leave you to fill in, which, by the way, is also brain research. Your brain doesn't want to know every crumb on the table and every brick in the wall. It just wants to know there was crumbs and there was a wall.
Jenna, you said that beautifully. I completely agree. Critique partners and read other people, specifically publishing now. That's exactly the answer I would give to.
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure what this next question is asking, but I think it's asking, how do you decide if your story is upper middle grade or a lower YA type story?
Well, I mean, looking at the examples you gave there, like Harry Potter obviously started out as, middle grade and then transitioned all the way up to YA. So kind of similar with Percy Jackson as well. False Prince is a little different, which I love. Character, it's almost more the circumstances and the things that are happening that can kind of cue you off to whether or not it's upper or lower, middle grade YA. It kind of depends on the book, which is not a helpful answer. I'm sorry. I don't know. I guess you could go with your gut, and well, you can also look around at other books and see how they are categorized. Specifically, go to Goodreads and see what the genre is listed for, similar titles to what you think yours is. It's not a super helpful answer, sorry.
Anybody else have? Yeah, go for it, Jenna.
So this summer, I've been thinking about this magical marketing place called 12 and Up, which is really that exact place that you're straddling. And one of the mentor texts that I think about a lot is the Lockwood and Company series by Jonathan Stroud. So this is marketed as middle grade horror, like 12 and up, but the danger is pretty intense, and what happens to the characters is definitely not about some of the other middle grade themes like friendship and like no parents, because that's not what it's about. So I think you think about your themes, and then you're thinking about marketing, like to what some of the other mentors were saying, is that straddle line may be about your publishing path with that book as well, and what see it in, which classrooms you see it in, which libraries and stuff like that. So that, and then another thing, just from a pure like classrooms and the world of books, is that if your book is chock full of swearing and it has sex and drugs in it, you can't call it middle grade. It just won't sell. You can't sell it to sixth graders and put it in the book fair. So that's another thought. If you're like splashing a lot of blood, maybe it's not middle grade. Maybe it is.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this question because I know so little about middle grade. But in YA, the main themes should be about shedding the myths of childhood, about becoming a young adult. If your book deals with those themes of coming of age, then it's probably a young adult novel, and think about how it fits into the market that way. That's a good young adult test.
All right. If you see me yawning, it's not because I'm bored. I did some research on like how to mumble less when you're doing videos and podcasts and stuff like that, and everyone suggested yawning, and so now it's created this like link in my brain to where when I start thinking about mumbling, I start yawning. So that's if you see me yawning, it's because I'm wondering if I'm mumbling. All right. Maxwell asks, over a month will pass between submission deadline and mentee selection. Is it okay to keep working on the manuscript and revising, or would it be best to put it down and work on something else until selection?
I think I'm going to vote, put it down, work on something else. Because at that point, if we're reading the manuscript and then we choose you and you come back and you're like, hey, well, actually, I've got this whole new version. You want to read it all over again? It's just really going to complicate things. And I think if you're entering pitch wars, your book should be the best you can make it. So at that point, you've got to feel comfortable with what you've got and go into it with confidence and say, okay, I realize that maybe it's not perfect because no book is, but then let it be. And honestly, it'll probably do you a world of good to just work on something else, because otherwise you're going to sit and obsess over requests and who's reading and working the same book over and over again. Working on something new, probably your best bet.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that if I pick you as my mentee, then I want you to come in really excited to work. And if you have just spent the last month torturing yourself again over every little detail, rather than working on something new and then coming at your manuscript again a month later with fresh eyes, I think that is a better place to begin the revision process with your pitch wars mentor. Yeah, also you can drive yourself crazy. If you know that somebody else is reading your full and you go into your full, you will find every typo you never saw before. You will find every character arc that you don't love. So why torture yourself? And then you give yourself the opportunity to come at it again, excited to work.
So there's some emotional distance that you get from putting that book down for a month that I think will make you more ready to work on it a month later when you get picked. It just, I can't tell you like how much easier it is for me to like cut whole swaths of stuff I didn't need once I've been away from the book for a little while, instead of me just touching it every single day. So I agree with the other mentors that, plus, like Sasha said earlier, you're not a one book person. You're someone who's going to be writing books for a long, long time. So you might as well, you've been disciplined and not paid attention to those shiny ideas that are flirting with you all this time to get your book ready for pitch wars. So now you get to get them out the drawer and play with the shiny ideas until you hear from us. I think that would be a way more fun and productive use of your month.
Yeah, exactly. Start something new. It's just like when you're querying, you get that book out and you're waiting to hear what happens, or when you're waiting for your edit letter back from your editor. Start something new so you don't drive yourself nuts. Or you don't start working on something that maybe your editor or your mentor comes back and says, hey, I think we should try this, or what do you think about this? And you haven't invested all this time and idea that maybe you end up changing, and it's just, yeah, just start something new. Don't worry about it. We've already got it. We're working on it.
All right, so we are coming close to the end, so we have actually more questions than I think we're going to be able to get to. So I'm just going to prioritize them based on basically the answers that I want to hear from y'all. So I'm just being honest. So we have a question from Sarah. How would you sell a book that's more character relationship driven than plot driven? I'm finding it's hard to summarize a plot since the plot is the character's relationship changing.
I think relationships still have stakes. I know that the relationships in my life have stakes, that my life would change if something in them were to go wrong or if they were to morph into something else. So figure out what the stakes are within that relationship. What happens if they're no longer friends? What happens if they go from being friends to being more? What happens if that doesn't work out? What's at risk for them? And the risk can be emotional. I don't mind relationship-driven books. I think that something that stuck in my head that Maggie Stiefvater said about the Raven Cycle series was that the worst possible outcome for those characters is that they ended the book no longer being friends. It wasn't that they didn't find the Welsh King or the magic didn't work out. The stakes were truly their friendship. So I still think it's okay. Just figure out what the stakes are.
Yeah, I think even in relationships, your characters are still going to be making decisions. They're still going to want things. So that's your plot, right? I mean, they're making decisions that change things from that point on. And so I think if you can maybe focus on those points, at what point does this character do something that changes the way that that relationship functions going forward? That's one of your plot points. And so if you have to look at it super critically and analytically, I guess, in order to find that plot, that would probably be where I'd start. Look at those big decision points and kind of branch out from there. And I think then you have the option to, take those and figure out exactly what your plot is.
Also, it's great to look at the books that have done that successfully. And you can say, okay, how was the blurb for the description for that book handled, even if it's not a plot-driven book? So look at those examples and see what they focus on. And I'm sure it's going to be exactly like what Sasha and Andrea said, where they talk about the stakes for these relationships, which is a story. That's a plot right there.
So I was thinking about time frame, because one thing that would be hard, so to me this feels like a romance question, because this is really the plot of pretty much every romance novel is a relationship, impacts and changes people. But timeline and setting can also be a really interesting way to frame out how that relationship. I'm thinking of something like Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, or some books that really just where they have a specific and tight timeline, one night, or they only see each other once a year, for over the course of 4 years, or however you do that. I think it'll still feel like plot. I love everything my fellow mentors said about stakes and character change, because that's really it. But if you're thinking about how do I describe this, you could think about setting and time frame as another way to emphasize the challenges that this relationship is going to have over the course of the book.
Anybody else? I don't know about anybody else, but I'm like very distracted by Andrea's cat. I love it so much. Okay, Melissa, we may get one or two more questions in. If we didn't get to your question tonight, I would definitely recommend you tune into the upcoming chats, and I'm going to put the schedule again at the end so you can see when those are coming up. But we'll do one more question and we'll do our outros with the individual mentors. Stephen tweeted about me yawning, by the way, and and someone said more oxygen to the brain causes improved function. So we're just going to go with that. All right. Melissa asks, do you think disabled characters can have a place in the young adult market?
Yes, I want to answer this. Yes, please. They absolutely do. I was just talking about the book, Momentous Events in the Life of a Cactus, which comes out, like a week or two? And the character was born without arms. And it's a brilliant book. And I absolutely want to see more books like that. And they certainly have a market. Like I said, this is a sequel. First one did tremendously well. And I'm assuming, well, I'm inferring here, but I hope that you're talking about characters with visible disabilities as opposed to invisible disabilities, which we do see quite a lot of. And I'm hoping that we get to see more with people with physical, obvious disabilities. And I think the market wants that. I know that they do. It's something that I'm hoping to start working on more myself in my books. But yes, please. And I think yes. Oh, and I don't even know if I mentioned, if you guys don't know if you've read my bio, but I'm a wheelchair user. I'm a tetraplegic, so I'm paralyzed from the chest. That's something that's super important to me, to see more of that and to start writing more of that myself. It's kind of a hard thing to do, but I want to see it, and I think that the market wants to see it too.
Anybody else? I have a friend who is a partial quadriplegic wheelchair user, and he was like, when are you going to write a book about someone like me? And I was like, I would never write that book, but if you want to co-write it with me, we can talk about that, you know.
But you could write it. Just do your research. You could do it. I always say that to people too, because I know there's a lot of, it's like, oh, you can't write that if you're not. And frankly, there's not enough disabled authors. And look, I can say that for myself because I haven't written it yet. We need those books, and I think we need those characters. And sometimes those are the hardest mirrors to look into for somebody with a disability. I struggle sometimes with that, and I think it'd be great if you want to write that. And this is to prospective mentees as well. If you want to write somebody with a disability that you don't have, do your research. You can do that. You can talk to people with those disabilities. Please do, in fact, to be authentic with your research and do it. And then send it to me.
All right, so we are out of time, so I'm going to ask each of the mentors here to tell us where we can find them online, if we have follow-up questions where we can ask you those questions, and also if you have anything coming up, like a book coming out or a giveaway that you're launching or anything like that, please let us know. Abigail, we'll start with you.
Okay, yeah, so you can find me. My website is abigailjohnsonbooks.com. It's got all my social media accounts there. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. Instagram is my favorite, so come find me over there. Like I said, my book, Every Other Weekend, is my 4th contemporary YA, and it's coming out on January 7th from Inkyard Press, which is HarperCollins. You can see it there. So now everywhere, and I hope you do. So I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but this is my 2nd year as a pitchwars mentor. I was a mentee several years ago, and my book that I entered into pitchwars actually became my first novel. And to go back to it, when we were talking about everybody, write something new when you're querying, this is the book I wrote while I was querying, If I Fix You, and now it's coming out. So it pays off.
Andrea?
Twitter has the links to all of my other things. So to make it simple, it's just Andrea_Contos. So if you find me there, you can find me everywhere else. No book covers yet, but fall of 2020, my Pitch Wars book actually will debut. So hopefully by this time next year, I'll be on this chat with, something to hold on.
Sasha?
Yeah, you can find me online at Twitter at Sasha P. Smith. My website is sashapsmith.com. My Instagram is Sasha Peyton Smith, but nothing has been posted on it yet. It's coming. Watch all of those websites for announcements within the next couple of months. If you want to get in touch with me about my wish list specifically, my DMs are open. If you have general questions that I think people could benefit from seeing the answer to, please just feel free to @ me on Twitter. I'll also be poking around the hashtag AskMentor hashtag questions.
And Jenna?
Hey, thank you, Sarah, and thanks, fellow mentors. This was so fun to do this with you today. I am at Legion of Jen because there are Jens everywhere in my life, so that was why I picked that as a Twitter handle. So at Legion of Jen on Insta and at Legion of Jen on Twitter. My website is jennalincoln.net. I like to answer wish list questions on that blog post so that like I said, anyone who's looking at my wish list can see those answers. But I will be on the Ask Mentor hashtag and then hitting the next YA chat. I have 3 books out. I have the first one. I just thought I was like holding it like, here's my pretty covers. So what's cool about being published with a digital first publisher is there's lots of chapters for free as samples. So if you want to kind of get a sense of my writing style, it's already out there. But thank you. It's really cool to meet everybody. Thanks for your awesome questions.
All right, and I am Sarah Nicolas. You can find me on Twitter at Sarah_Nicolas. Sarah has an H, Nicholas does not, Stephen. And I'm just messing with you. Everyone spells my last name wrong. It's fine. And then I'm on Instagram at President Sarah. And this is my YouTube channel. And I'm actually launching a new project in October that I can't quite give the details yet, but I'm super excited about. So if you want to get the details on that when they become available, make sure you subscribe to this channel. And thank you all so much. I'm going to put the upcoming chat schedule on the screen while we get all the mentors off of the chat. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you so much for answering questions. Without your questions, we wouldn't have anything to talk about. So we really appreciate those. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you, everybody.
And like we said in the chat, if you are not sure what Pitchwars is, you can go to our website, which is, you can see at the top of this graphic right now, pitchwars.org. There's a page called New Start here, and then there's also a submission FAQ page. So make sure you both of those to get all the information that you could want about Pitchwars. And if you want to catch some of the previous video chats, or if you're watching this late and you want to make sure you see all the upcoming video chats, those are all going to be available at the playlist that you can get to by typing in bit.ly/pitchwarslive. There's also going to be a couple Pitchwars advice blogs from me on that playlist as well. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great Saturday. Bye.